Hey, what's going on, everyone? Tonight we have a special guest with us. This is Hobbs. He's not going to sit still for very long, but he was in his kennel for all day, and I knew I had to come back here and still finish some stuff up. So I just brought him with the office. So if you hear his squeaky toys or you hear him whining, that's what it is. It's this little guy. You might even hear his little toy Gumby that no longer has arms on it because he ripped them off. Actually, I'm not going to let him play with that right now, otherwise it'll be super annoying. But tonight, I'm going to talk to you guys about ADHD, and specifically just to parents of kids with ADHD, and just letting them know that I understand that it's a complex puzzle that they're trying to solve, and I just want to give them any kind of knowledge or tips that I have that will help them solve that. And to start, the very first thing I want to say is the human brain, it has an enormous capacity to repair itself. It's extremely plastic, which means it's changeable and it's moldable and it heals and it repairs itself. So that should be a really encouraging thing to parents, and knowing that it's not something that just has to be that way the whole time. They've been told that it's a genetic thing and there's nothing you can do about it. But we know that the human brain is very changeable and it can repair itself. And just from my knowledge, ADHD, in my opinion, is when it's when the right attentional networks, the right hemisphere, are not as strong as the left hemisphere. So what I mean by that are some of their attentional networks are going to be they're not going to be as strong. So kids aren't going to be able to fixate their eyes. If you see a kid with ADHD, with pretty bad ADHD, they're going to always be darting their eyes around, and they're never going to be able to fixate and concentrate on something. So that in part is because their attentional networks are weak in their frontal cortex. But the reason that can be is because they have not developed the proper motor movements. They still have primitive reflexes. Usually the most common primitive reflexes they have, which are your infant reflexes, they're there. They should go away by about 6 months. With kids with ADHD, they usually don't. But the most common infant reflexes they still have is an ATNR and an STNR, which is an asymmetric tonic neck reflex and a symmetric tonic neck reflex. And these are really going to affect eye movement and eye tracking and their ability to scan very smoothly without jumping around, both in the horizontal plane as well as the vertical plane. So that's going to really affect reading comprehension if they have ATNR and an STNR, as well as just eye fixation in general. And then another one they have is usually a tonic labyrinthine reflex, which is abbreviated a TLR. And that is really going to affect their body control and their postural reflexes. Kids with ADHD are usually fairly uncoordinated. They don't have great body control. They can't feel their body very well, and they're just basically uncoordinated. They might have a weird gait and things like that. And then the last one they usually have is a Moreau reflex, which is kind of the baby startle reflex. And if you have this and it's chronically getting elicited by stimuli, what's going to happen is that your attention's going to always be directed somewhere else. So if they see something out of the corner of their eye, if they don't like the texture of their clothes, if someone's tapping their foot on the ground, they can't ever filter that out, and this Moreau reflex is always directing their attention to that, so they can't ever concentrate in the classroom. But yeah, they have poor balance and coordination. They can't sit still for long periods of time. This is because after primitive reflexes go away, you need to develop your postural reflexes, which will let you sit still for long periods of time and be able to hold your attention. So that is the main things we do in the office, but there are also things that I have that my patients do at home that help speed up care. And the biggest thing is decreasing inflammation. So the less inflammation that the child is experiencing, the faster that they're going to get better. And almost every kid with ADHD has a lot of inflammation. So what I mean by that is if you reduce the pro-inflammatory cytokines in the brain, this is what's necessary to get the brain back on normal maturity and normal development and getting rid of those primitive reflexes. So we want to make sure that we are doing that, we're getting rid of the inflammation. And then another thing is most parents have been told that ADHD or even other neurodevelopmental disorders are genetic in nature, which isn't necessarily true. Most people think of genetics and they think, oh, I can never change that. It's unchangeable. This is just how it's going to be. But actually, it's more epigenetic in nature. And what that means is, if you picture your gene, that cannot change. That's obvious. But then if you picture your gene has 100 different light switches on it, and then they're all turned on and off, and then whatever combination that is, it's expressed that way. You can actually change the toggle switches on it so it expresses differently. So we're beginning to understand that once human genes are turned on by inflammation, so some of these light switches get turned on by inflammation, they can be turned off again once that inflammation in the body goes down. So once that inflammation in the body goes down, you turn those light switches back off, and then that gene expresses totally different, which is why ADHD can see such major changes when you actually start with the brain in mind. But if you're looking for the best ways to reduce that inflammation, which is always going to speed up the process of getting these kids with ADHD better, it's you can do that nutritionally. Most kids actually, I haven't seen a kid with ADHD that hasn't been sensitive to gluten. The two biggest offenders for them are going to be gluten and dairy, but I would absolutely decrease gluten. The kids with ADHD, their guts cannot handle it. Their guts get really inflamed. The gluten gets into the bloodstream. It creates this big inflammatory cycle. And when your gut's inflamed, that means your brain's going to be inflamed. So then they start experiencing symptoms of ADHD. So those are the biggest things. And then also I would take a very high quality omega-3 that has about twice as much DHA as it does EPA. That's not only going to help the brain inflammation, it's also going to help heal and seal the gut, as well as with prebiotics. So prebiotics are basically, it's a fiber, and if your kid has something called SIBO, which is a small intestine bacterial overgrowth, and a lot of kids with ADHD have this, what a prebiotic is going to do, it's going to be fiber that helps separate out the bacteria that should be in the large intestine, but it kind of has crept up to the small intestine. It'll kind of help separate those back out. So that's what prebiotics are going to do. So prebiotics, an omega-3 with twice as much DHA as EPA, and then taking the right amount of it. If you ever have specific questions to your case or your kid, always feel free to call the office. I'd love to talk, or just give any of my recommendations that I can in any way to help you guys. But I think that's about all I had to cover tonight. I just know that once you decrease the inflammation, as well as you start getting rid of these primitive reflexes and getting their brain developing properly and getting their right brain to talk to their left brain and getting them able to cross the midline so they can start using that whole brain, is when they're able to really start focusing better and behaving better and just kind of becoming a different kid. So that's what I have for you today. If you ever have questions, the office is 402-504-4676. But with that, I'm going to call it a night. So I hope you guys have a great night, and I hope to be on live again tomorrow. So stay tuned.